Welcome to Spotlight, Vancouver, Washington. I am your host, Doug Varenas, licensed real estate agent in Washington and Oregon. Today, we're going to talk about Washington State's new rent control and why this is not a good thing for Washington State for renters and investors. So let's get right into it. Thanks for joining. If you like what you're hearing, hit the subscribe button and the like button. It really helps me. And if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in the Vancouver area, PDX, let's set up a 100% pressure-free information call where I can answer all your questions and we can figure out if we're a good match to work together. The link is in the description. So, Washington, why? Why did you do this? I kind of get it, but I don't think it's a good thing for the state, and I don't think it's a good thing for renters, and I don't think it's a good thing for investors. And if this is the trend line we're going to see in Washington State, we're going to lose a lot of investment, and we're going to go downhill a la Oregon PDX area as far as what we're seeing there. I don't think it's a good idea, but let's go over it. It doesn't seem completely unreasonable, but I do not think it's a good thing overall. Looking at overall the House Bill 1217, the rent cap. Okay, so landlords are going to be prohibited from increasing rent by more than 7% plus inflation or 10%, whichever is lower, within any 12-month period. And this is set for 15 years, expiring in 2040. Yikes. Can't even overturn this or take a look at it and the effects it's having. There's some exemptions here. So manufactured mobile homes, if you own your homes but rent the land, the annual rent increases are capped at 5%. Landlords cannot increase rent during the first 12 months of a new tenancy, but landlords are able to increase rents to market rents when a tenant moves out. So these are primarily for existing tenants. There are some exemptions. So new constructions are exempt for the first 12 years after they have built. Affordable housing is exempt, and small owner occupied properties like duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, where the owner occupies one unit, are exempt from this. So overall, this doesn't seem like the most draconian rent increase, but I don't like the trend. I don't like where this is going. This isn't good, and I'm going to get into it. So I think everybody's first reaction to this is going to be like, this is a good thing. This is great. We need to protect tenants from unreasonable increases in rent. And this is an overall positive for renters in Washington State. Unfortunately, I don't think this is what's going to happen, and I don't think this is the trend overall. So I'm going to put a link to a Freakonomics podcast where they talked about rent control and why it's not so great. They're going to explain it generally better than I will, but I'm going to give you the high-level overview of why it's not really good. So I've been a renter and I've been a landlord, and I have experienced extreme rent increases that really weren't fair. And so when I was living in Northwest Portland, in that Nob Hill area, kind of Pearl District adjacent, this was 2004 to 2007. And there was a lot of rent increases there. There was a lot of people moving in. They were doing a lot of renovation there. And what they were doing basically was like jacking up the rents 100% in order to get people to kind of move out because they wanted to renovate the property to sell it or just to increase the rents. And so, yeah, it didn't feel good to have rents go up. It was like 100%. And so I ended up moving. My rent was pretty cheap to begin with. So I didn't cry too much about it. And it wasn't, I didn't have a family. So it was, I paid $400 a month for like a 400 square foot studio, which is a pretty sweet deal. Just me hanging out, having a good time. And then they decided to renovate the building. They jacked up everybody's rent. I was going to be paying over $800 for the same place. That's never good. And I don't want to see that happen to people. So I want to get that out in the air. I don't think that's a good thing to do. And I think generally, Yeah, that's wrong. And that is not good. So I don't think anybody wants to see that. So from the landlord's perspective, it's a business, and the rents are determined by the market, what people are willing to pay for that type of property, whether it be a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom house. And so the rent is a reflection of what people are willing to pay in the market. And then the rent increases typically are a product of increases on the expense side of the owner. So this typically takes the form of increases in insurance premiums and property taxes and any renovations that they might have done or repairs they might have done that the tenant benefits from. But it's typically insurance and property taxes. And so are those being capped with this bill? No. And so that puts potentially a disproportionate burden on the landlord to have their margins hit by these rent caps. And you're thinking to yourself, boo-hoo, poor landlords. But it is a business, and landlords are providing a service. And as a landlord, I appreciate my tenants and I want them to be able to pay the rent. So I don't have an incentive to increase rents above market and to these extraordinary degrees. I don't know who's doing this or what the issue's been. I haven't heard about this from investor friends or in the market in general where rents are being jacked up, 100%, 50%. I'm not seeing that. And I think if that happens, that is wrong. And that's not good business because I think that if you jack up your rents too much, you're going to lose tenants. They're going to go someplace where it's less expensive for an equivalent place. So I can't just jack up rents whenever I want to for however much I want. Like people aren't going to pay it and I'm going to lose tenants. And anytime I lose a tenant, I lose money because it's a vacancy. There's nobody renting that place. And then I need to do some repairs to turn the place around. Maybe I need to paint. Maybe I need to do, some repairs after a tenant leaves. So I'm losing 1 month, 2 months worth of rent. So I'd rather keep a tenant in place, happy with how much they're paying. I make some money on the property. They enjoy living there. They can afford it. And so these rents just don't come out of the sky. Like I don't just decide, I want to charge this amount. And no, they're a product of how much I have to pay to service my loan on the property. So the principal, the interest, the taxes and insurance. And so the principal and the interest are pretty fixed. Those are fixed costs with a 30-year mortgage, but the insurance and the taxes aren't. And especially with the cost of borrowing money, the interest rates are higher. And so that means investors' monthly payments are higher, and that means the rent is going to be higher. That's just the simple math of property owners looking to rent out their places. And so there's a misunderstanding that everybody who has a rental property is some, evil person or just, I had a lot of tenants think like the rent that they pay is what I take home, which is not true. Like you pay her, $2,200 a month or $2,400 a month. I don't see $2,200 a month. Like I have expenses, and it's not to say, I don't do well, but it's not what tenants tend to think. It is a business. There are expenses. So what happens in rent control, and it hasn't really worked. It's in New York, it's in San Francisco, it's in Oregon. And what happens is that if you're not able to recoup those expenses via rent increases because they're capped, you're going to find other ways to do them. And so that could look like not including any utilities or services. So maybe now you're going to pay garbage fees or water fees or something that was included in the rent, but now because I cannot increase the rent to cover my cost, you're just going to pay for it if possibly increased services in the form of utilities or garbage. The second way I'm going to recoup that difference is going to be like, maybe I'm not quick to repair things. I'm not on top of it. And that is not providing a good service. Like landlords shouldn't want to do that. I know there's a lot of landlords out there that do try to skimp on maintenance. It's not uncommon. I realize that. But in general, You want to see maintenance done on your property. It's in your best interest as a landlord to have your property in good shape. And so, but if I cannot cover my expenses with rent increases, then I'm going to look for other ways. Like the tenant is still going to pay for those increase in expenses. Whether they think they are or not, they're going to be paying for it in some way. And that's simple economics. Another thing is it discourages investment. If investors cannot get market rent and cannot increase rents according to whatever the market dictates. So you could see less housing inventory, less rental inventory, less new construction, less people investing, people pulling out of the state, which I'm definitely would consider doing because there's other places that don't have these rent controls where the market determines what the rent is and it's a little bit friendlier for investors. So that can lower inventory, which could actually increase rents over time, despite the purpose of it being to keep rents capped at a certain degree. The other thing is it could encourage people who would normally move on to stay in a rent-controlled apartment. So I know this happens a lot in New York where these people have been living in these apartments for like 20 years with the same rent. And if you're younger and looking for a place to rent, or you're moving to the city looking for a place to rent, there's going to be less inventory because people are just sitting in these rent-controlled apartments. And so overall, I don't think this is a great trend for Washington. I think it tends to lower investment. And the other side of the coin with this is when you get these like no cause evictions and you're not able to evict tenants when they're not paying rent. So have you seen that in Portland? Or you have to pay relocation fees. So when I owned rental property in Portland, I couldn't get people out. There was no way to get a tenant out, even if they weren't a good tenant. Maybe they didn't pay the rent. They had a lot of legal protection, and they took advantage of that. I had tenants who definitely took advantage of the fact that they couldn't be evicted without a very long process. Meanwhile, they're not paying anything. And then, so in Portland, they had a thing where, and it's still around, where, there's no cause evictions. So even if the lease expires and maybe you're on a month to month and you give significant notice, like 90 days, 60 days, I still had to pay the relocation fee for my tenant. So even with significant notice, I had to pay, it was like $3,300 for this tenant's relocation fee, which is just nuts. And that we're on the way there. Like, this is the trend. This is the trend that we're seeing. And again, these are well-meaning regulations like the rent cap. And again, this doesn't seem crazy, but it opens the door to more and more sort of anti-investor legislation, which in the end is going to lower the availability of rental houses, which is actually going to increase rents in the long run. Investors are going to leave. That's the short of it. So again, are these horrible right now? No. They don't look unreasonable, but again, are they capping property taxes at 7% increases? Are they capping insurance premiums at 7%? Like, if you don't have a corresponding cap on the other expenses, you're going to hurt landlords, which is going to force them out, which again is going to lower inventory, which is going to make housing more expensive and less available for people. So I understand the idea behind it. Like, we don't want to see these crazy rent increases. I can tell you that in general, this isn't what landlords are looking to do anyway. So I feel like this is pandering to people who don't understand what's going on. They don't understand the basic economics behind renting and between landlords and tenants. And so it's easy to tell them, like, we're going to cap these rents and this is great and then vote for me. But in the end, you're going to see investors leave the state, and that is not good. You want to attract people and investors into the state so you can have more housing, so you can have more units, which has more competition, which conceivably will stabilize rents. And let's be honest, rents are always going up because expenses are always going up. That's just how general inflationary economy works. Like everything's getting more expensive. And I get it. Like it's crazy. Like I don't lack empathy for people that are spending, 50% of their income or more on housing. That is nuts because we haven't seen wages keeping up with the cost of housing. So I don't mean to sound, like I'm coming with a lack of empathy for renters. That's not the case. But, I am providing a service that involves certain expenses. There's expenses and it's a business. And so I want to provide a product that meets the needs of my tenants. And I want them to be able to comfortably pay a fair rent. And I'm not looking to jack up rents that much. And I don't know anyone who really is. Now, will they raise rents when appropriate? Yes. Like that's just part of it. And so I don't like the direction the state is going with these more tenant friendly laws. I don't think it's good. So I could be, let me know what your experience has been, either if you're an investor or a renter. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what your experience has been, what your thoughts are. Again, I'll put a link to that Freakonomics episode podcast about rent control. It's really interesting. They do a good job of presenting both sides. And so you can check that out. And I hope this has been helpful for you. Take care, and I'll see you on the next episode.